How's everybody doing out there? Yeah, very nice. Thank you so much. Of course, it is the fourth and final panel of day 4, the grand finale. Sorry, day 3. Thank you for correcting it in real time. Sort of feel like you were wooing at the fourth panel, but you caught me making a mistake. I appreciate it. Day 3, the final one. Let's hear it for day 3 of the Hollywood Climate Summit, everybody. Thank you very much. And of course, let's hear it for the people who are putting this event on. I'm talking about Allison, Allie, and Heather. Oh, yeah. And of course, the ASL interpreters over here. They are capable of interpreting anything from some guy talking about a stampede of horses to someone yelling at that guy. A different person, though. Different person. Yelling at the first guy, and then referring to themselves, the interpreters, referring back to the speaker, and then back to the interpreters in a sort of meta tornado of interpretation that they are all capable of acing. Any one of those can ace. So give it up for them one more time. Very good. Now, I am told that the fourth panel is, so the other two just had to do that's okay. All right. I'm told that the fourth panel is sometimes we're a little lower energy because we've just been blasted in the face with some climate facts, and we're losing a little bit of the steam. So I'm going to try to get the steam back. I don't know if you guys were here last time, but I was mercilessly heckled by some no, it was great. It was good audience participation. But I'm gonna come into the audience and I'm gonna ask somebody to just say one thing that they learned from the previous 3 panels. I think I'm gonna do it because there might be some feedback, and if there is, I'm gonna bail on this bit. But just know I'm coming into the audience, so prepare yourselves emotionally for what is a breaking of the fourth wall. Are you ready for this? All right, and then kind of visually make yourselves available to the microphone if you want to say something. Don't raise your hand, but make it clear through your body language that you want to say something. You ready? Okay. All right, here I go. And if we get a full wash, that would be so sick. All right. Okay, this guy definitely not making eye contact. Get it? You don't want that. 2 people just staring down at the floor. All right, we know no one wants it. No one wants it. Anybody? Okay, I got no, okay, all right, no. Okay, if you didn't see that, her friend pointed at her, and then she's like, I'll kill you. So, okay, but I do see someone over here. Okay, I'm coming over here. Revolt. One more time.
Revolt.
Revolt, a callback from the 3rd panel. Give it up big. That's audience participation. That's some opt-in audience shit, okay? I'm not going to go around and just make somebody say something. Thank you so much. Big applause for this audience member who got us to the transition point. Now we can officially get to the final panel. You ready for the final panel of the night? All right, very good. Please give it up for actually a friend of mine who just moved across the country. I'm assuming not to get away from me, but to move to LA. She's the founder of the Green Jobs Board. Give it up big for Christy Drutman, everybody.
What's up, everyone? That was a long walk. That was a long walk, longer than I thought back there. Anyways, well, thank you all for staying awake and staying present for this very critical conversation and last but not least panel of day 4. Can we give it up for this panel, please? Please, give the energy up for us. So as was mentioned by my dear friend Raleigh, this is Cross-Sector Leaders Advancing Climate Transformation. And who am I? I'm Christy Drutman. I am the creator and founder of Brown Girl Green on the interwebs, as well as, thank you, as well as the co-CEO of Green Jobs Board. We are a platform focused on giving job seekers all the tools and resources they need to take action and build a career they love to address the climate crisis. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today because I'm someone who has very much lived at the intersections of, climate justice, communications, media, and entertainment, as many people in this room have. And, there's so many different sectors and people that are trying to do work in this space, but they don't always talk to each other. They don't always talk about what these interventions look like, how to make this action actionable, and how to, reach fans. And so at the Hollywood Climate Summit, in that spirit, we really want to host this panel to talk about these different sectors and how each of these incredible people are using their own approaches through communication and entertainment to help bridge those gaps. So I'd love for each of you to start off by introducing yourselves and speaking briefly to your work and its intersection with addressing the climate crisis. And we'll start here.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. We're all awake, and I'm so happy. Well, my name is Maggie Baird, and I'm the founder of Support and Feed. But I can't really just start there because I think because it's a storytelling, theme of this summit, I kind of have to start with my story, which is I grew up in Western Colorado, in the a really long time ago, and was in love with nature, lived an outdoor life, loved nature and loved animals. And, in my teens, I read Diet for a Small Planet, and I made the connection between animal agriculture and the destruction of our environment. I heard someone say earlier that when they heard about climate change, they heard it as their grandchildren's grandchildren, but in fact in the 70s we knew all about it, and we knew what we were headed for. And then I moved to New York City and saw an infographic about how much of the Amazon rainforest was being destroyed for McDonald's hamburger, and this just became a personal mission. And I was, to be honest, kind of the only person I knew, aside from going to a Greenpeace rally, etc. I didn't know any other vegetarians or vegans or outside of my family, and that's how I lived my life. And then, strangely, I moved to LA, and my personal mission was really all about the environment. And I'm technically an actor. That's what I do for a living. And then my children found themselves in the music industry. My daughter is Billie Eilish, and my son is Phineas. And when we stepped into the music industry, I just was shocked and appalled. And everything I saw was like, wait, we're trying to live this very sustainable life, and yet why are there plastic water bottles, and why is the diesel running, and why are there gift boxes with wrapping in them, and why isn't there plant-based food everywhere? And so I sort of just devoted myself to being an advocate for my daughter, who cared very much about this as well, and just advocating at every turn, asking questions. Why can't we do this? Can we do this differently? How could we do this? Why can we? And then amazingly, miraculously, my children got quite well known, and people started listening to me and listening to Billy, really listening to Billy, let's be honest. I just was the nag. And so we just started being able to really make systemic change in what she did, and then what resonated in the music industry, to the point of touring and all plant-based meals on our tours, and no plastic water bottles, and et cetera, merch, vinyl, everything. And then we founded Support and Feed during the pandemic, which is an organization that addresses the climate crisis and food equity, because we know that those are inextricably entwined, and that when we feed people, we can feed people and not just address food insecurity, but we can address food equity and offer people more nourishing, delicious, plant-based meals that are better for their health, better for the planet, and can support local community businesses. We can do so much more with $1 than just feed somebody a meal. And so that is another big avenue that I'm involved in, which also leads back to the music industry. So those are my two hats, and that's why I'm here.
Hi, everyone. I did not come prepared with a story, so so my name is Deborah Mensah-Bonsu. I founded a company called Games for Good. I work with the gaming industry and game studios, as well as NGOs, on trying to use gaming and the influence that games have for social impact and climate action. And I've been working in the games industry for the last more than a decade. Started out in console, went into mobile, and then at some point I kind of wondered, What else can games do besides entertain? I think the same way that lots of other mediums can do things besides entertain, games can also in very powerful ways. And so I became interested in that, started doing that work, and it has led me here. And I'm sure we'll dig into that a lot deeper, but I'll pass it over to Brad first.
Well, thank you, and thanks everybody for staying here. Nice to meet you both. I'm Brad Wieners. I'm the editorial director at Patagonia, the apparel company in Ventura. And I think I'm here because the company does do a lot of storytelling, has a film division, makes movies, but is also really, really passionate, obsessed with trying to improve the way we make the things that we sell. So we're working on climate or the environmental crisis as advocates. The company actually has been donated to a nonprofit that directs all of our profits in perpetuity to environmental issues. And we, of course, want to tell stories about those efforts. And then we've got some really smart, more engineering minds that are going into our supply chain, which I know is a term, especially at this hour, will put people to sleep. But the really the stuff, like I almost get insecure sometimes as a storyteller because I'm just sharing a story, but they're actually solving the problems. And love to talk about that some more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daphne Siebold. I am the co-founder of a company called Sky Farm Universe. I was a former marketing and communications executive and working in high fashion and retail, and essentially quit my job about 2 years ago to form a business with the artist Dan Colin. It's essentially built to generate advocacy and sustaining revenue for the work of Sky Farm, which is a nonprofit in the Hudson Valley. The farm is really dedicated to creating pathways to food sovereignty. It does this through a number of avenues. It donates 100% of all of its regen-grown produce and pasture-fed livestock to marginalized communities. It grants $350,000 a year to farmers that are unseen by the system and don't benefit from the subsidies that big ag receives. It has a fellowship for BIPOC and LGBTQ farmers and fellows that are individuals that are interested in food systems jobs and engages in educational programming. The brand is really a way for us to galvanize participation in the pop cultural space through the regular consumer. We started in the fashion industry. We partner with experts who have an existing footprint so that we can essentially deliver our clothing and goods to a much broader audience. We focus primarily on making the goods out of dead stock, vintage, upcycled fabrications. We collaborate tremendously. Balenciaga, Comme des Garçons, Nike, the artist COS. I'm actually wearing a pair of our new Converse that have just launched. They're their first collaboration with a sustainable upper made out of dead stock workwear. The bigger goal here is really to engage both the consumer through to the corporate entities in a bigger sort of dialogue around the types of systemic change we need to see. And through an innovation in our business model, we have essentially centered the work of the farm in the brand model so that with every purchase, each customer is a donor. Through this model in the last 2 years, we've raised about $700,000, basically by cleaving a donation from the wholesale markup that then goes straight to the farm. It means that regardless of how well products sell, there's always money flowing, but that essentially everybody that participates or engages with the brand is participating in the issues at large.
I already have so many questions for the rest of this panel. It's like the networking's already started. But well, first of all, I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you all for sticking out for the last panel, right? We're going to bring the energy for this session. My name is Eric Dissler. I have the privilege of overseeing the sustainability program at AEG. So that's Anschutz Entertainment Group. And for some of you that may not know who AEG is, we own and operate sports teams and venues, music festivals, music venues. We take artists on tour, not Billy, but other artists. And we also own a ticketing company as well, so Access. So we sort of sit at this kind of cross-sector within entertainment space. And as you can imagine, dealing with sustainability issues, global sustainability issues, we have a global footprint, are challenging across that diverse portfolio, and we can certainly get into that. Background is I think it's interesting hearing Maggie's story. I'm a kid who grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in central Iowa for most of my childhood and had a lot of the same realizations with agriculture. Grew up in open space, felt a need and desire to want to do something about that. But I have a degree in accounting and finance, an undergraduate degree, and a graduate school degree in sustainability. So I kind of took a different pathway towards the way in which I think I can contribute. So I've been in big firm consulting, worked for 2 large firms doing sustainability strategy consulting, worked at Nike for a while. We could probably talk about some sustainable uppers. Maggie's got some nice shoes on over there. And so, it's interesting kind of meeting colleagues, and I know we'll get into the discussion and sort of finding the different ways in which we're all contributing, right? And so I spent a lot of time looking at budgets and, and making the case to our CFO to hire more staff and giving more budget to then do more great work. So, it's been a fun ride, and I know we'll get into the conversation. And thank you all for having me.
Well, as you can see, this is a very diverse panel. Every person has such a different story and a different pathway on what led them into the climate career they currently have. And, when we're talking about, shifting industry, a big part of that is challenging the status quo. In order to challenge the status quo, we have to do 2 things. We, one, have to think about, how are we setting the standard moving forward? And that requires collaboration. And how are we having people enforce and push that standard forward? And that requires competition. And all of you work in industries that contain elements of both of those aspects. So I'd love if anyone, maybe Eric, because we were talking backstage about this, could kick off this conversation around how do you strike that perfect balance between collaboration and competition to really, move the needle on these things?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in. And I think a group of us were talking about this. It's interesting, there's an inherent sort of competitive force within sports, right? So, and we talk about, first of all, there needs to be both, right? So when I was at Nike, we would talk to our colleagues at Adidas and talk to our colleagues in Under Armour and try to figure out what we could do together that was about a campaign that can push an issue forward. We know that sustainability is pre-competitive, right? But we can't be operating within sports without stoking sort of the elements of competition, right? And a lot of what you can do in a sports venue is replicable across another sports venue, right? And so I'll tell you, we own and operate Crypto.com Arena here in Los Angeles, and we are very aware of what's happening, certainly at the other stadium that's being built where one of our basketball teams is going, not to be named here, and then our competitors up north in San Francisco. But we're constantly looking at that bar being raised to that next level. We know that if something is being done within energy, waste, and water at a venue in the other part of the state, in the city, then that's pushing our leaders to want to do the same. And it gives my team the ability to go to those leaders and say, hey, we're going to be left behind, right? Maggie, we were talking a little bit about setting a new bar, right? And I think sports has that, but music has that as well.
Yeah, I think it's really about radical collaboration. I think all boats rise, right? And I think one of the things, I'm going to go back to animal agriculture, because one of the things that animal agriculture has done extremely well is they've been united. And so has fossil fuels. They've been extremely united in convincing everyone that you will not survive without them. And we on the other side have to be equally united. We have to collaborate. We have to work together. And, you're with AEG. My family, Billy works with Live Nation. And we talk together all the time. What are you doing? What can we do? How can we do better? And then when it comes to competition, we are trying to set the status quo. So when we're looking at a tour, all the questions are being asked. What's your sustainability policy? What are you doing here? Show us here. And then how much can you do more? And you know what? There's 2 venues in your town. Maybe that venue is doing more, and there's a lot of really good venues in the country that are really leading the way, and that's where competition matters. And when you get to people like sports teams or artists who do have a lot of power, that's when that competition will matter, because if you know that artists and sports teams and athletes and actors and producers care, then you're going to have to raise that bar, and everybody will benefit. But it's really a combination of collaborating and just making the status quo very high.
I'm thinking about the effort. It was 15 years it took Patagonia to work with Gore-Tex to get PFAS out of water repellency on jackets. And you can now purchase those. You can imagine that the people at Patagonia who worked on that would like to have kept the advantage of that for longer. But if you do put this value forward, then you say, you know what, we're going to publish this. We're going to make this available to others. Hopefully we'll get a couple seasons advantage out of that effort. But the company is committed to sharing that. We would prefer to model that than to, I guess, like sort of patent it and then sue people, right?
Can I say something about that in terms of storytelling? Because I think that's where storytelling is so important, because support and feed, one of our biggest missions on a smaller, more individual level, we are collaborating and supporting community organizations to support their work. On a bigger level, we really kind of want to be an elbow in the side of bigger organizations and say, hey, where's your plant-based food? Where's, what are you doing in this? So that's where you have to be big on the storytelling, which of course Patagonia is amazing at. But because if you don't shout your accomplishments, and if you don't raise that bar and tell that story, you won't get other people to go along with you.
Just one more thing around collaboration versus competition. I think there's such a power in community of practice. So one of the initiatives that I work with is called Playing for the Planet, and it's an initiative of 49 different members, so everyone from Microsoft and Sony and Ubisoft and all these different studios that have come together to try to understand more about decarbonization, to also learn from each other, and then try to use their games to reach millions of players every year around these different subjects. And I co-created something called the Green Game Jam, which we started back in 2020 with 11 studios, and we thought the way to fuel that thing was going to be by competition, because of course, games industry, very competitive. But then once we got going, what we actually found was that that spirit of collaboration was just way stronger than that competitive aspect when it comes to something like the environment, because we're all kind of trying to run the same race, and this is not a space where maybe we need to be so competitive, and we can actually be stronger together. So that's something that I really found within the games industry. Yeah.
I would just add, within fashion, I've always felt it's sort of notoriously competitive to the point where, no one shares information, as compared with maybe another industry like tech, where there's a lot of sort of open source data that's shared. The issue for me with that, and I actually don't think there's an alternative to collaboration if we're really serious about systemic change, is that, right now I see a lot of the big fashion players, working in isolation, right? They might invest in one technical innovation and hope that it works out. But from where I sit, unless there's a wholesale adoption of the same technology or some kind of consensus about what we need to adopt, everyone's just working in silos, and oftentimes at cross purposes. I think, for our brand, we're really trying to dissolve a lot of those barriers between the brands. We just hosted a massive picnic. It was really sort of a music festival that I very much wish Billy had performed at. But, we gathered, the Roots, Moses Sumney, Kelsey Lou. But I think maybe even more markedly, we brought companies like Chanel, Gagosian, JanSport, Birkenstock, The North Face, Levi's, Nike, all into the same room to support the same cause. And I rarely see, industry participants holding hands. So for us, I think that's sort of a critical piece of this pie, and it's not just within fashion, it's actually across adjacent industries. And so, funnily enough, now, we sit across, at least with Sky Farm Universe Fashion, we've moved into wellness and beauty, food and beverage, and I see a lot of the same issues in each of the industries, where everyone's really concerned and actively working to identify solutions within their individual spaces, but no one's talking across the aisle.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think something a lot of people don't think about is that there are parallels between these different industries and that, we can all trace it back to similar systems, similar interventions that need to change. And it requires, a little bit of that unified messaging. So I love everything you all said about having that balance between, we need to embrace our own uniqueness and what we're bringing, to the game while also recognizing that we all need this unified front that like we're all in it together, right? So I love everything you all shared about that. So we're gonna, thank you everyone. So, I want to dive into each of your unique experiences with your different sectors and how you are creating that influence. And I want to start with Brad. You were mentioning, Patagonia's explicit influence on, industries all over the world. But, you all are very explicit when it comes to your environmental activism. You even have an activism page on your website. And last year, Yvonne Chouinard announced Earth is our only shareholder. And many companies are terrified to even speak the word activism, let alone have overtly public-facing climate campaigns. But Patagonia is like busting out and is like, I'm here and I'm doing it. So, what I wanted to talk to you about is like, you all are taking risks. You all are at the forefront of this whole challenging the status quo thing. And you've had some successes and you've had some setbacks. I just wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit more on that journey. Why do you all, make such a forward-facing, explicit environmental activism, marketing front? And how do you feel like that's actually pushing, the industry forward?
Oh, that's a lot. How long do I have?
You can get it into like a little bite size somewhere. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna do something and then let everybody else talk too. Well, I think it's important to go back to the founder of the company, who was a climber who made equipment for climbing, and discovered very quickly that the equipment he was making was destroying the rocks they were climbing, right? So you're defacing the resource that is giving you all this joy and benefit. Once he figured that out, they designed these this sort of hexagonal pieces that could go into a crack in the rock and be removed. Now the rock's not broken and you can continue. So that's like the sort of foundation of the ethic. And from that, the founder kept learning that was sort of happening at a larger and larger scale. That is, the outdoor spaces, the land and waters that people who wear our apparel are enjoying are deteriorating. Maybe not quite as fast as hammering something into a rock, but now, as we know, at a global scale. So there's an urgency to communicate about it that comes from the founders of the company. And so those of us who work for them feel pretty licensed to go out and stir it up, raise some hell. You can have that as a broad mandate and really just make a hash of things, right? So there are a lot of really smart people trying to filter all the different issues. There's grant programs, there's media grant programs, there's ways to reach out into the community and find out better. And I would say this is a place where we're on a steep learning curve. We've always granted to grassroots organizations and we sort of trusted them to do what they do. Now we're going out and doing more listening and finding out what do these different groups, communities need, rather than showing up and just making a bunch of noise. So I think that would be a huge, quick lesson in the history of the company, is going from, we like the sound of that, we'll give you a few dollars for that, good luck, to, wait, before we do that, let's hear more about what you're doing and what is it you're gonna do. You're gonna be the decision maker once the money comes to you. That's a pretty profound shift for us.
I love that philosophy. That's fantastic. And, speaking of someone else who's done a lot of innovation in their industry, I want to pass it to Deborah. Obviously, you've been doing amazing work at Games for Good by tapping into people's superpowers. I love that a lot of the work you're doing is really tackling the gaming industry, but through this element that, gaming could be this space for healing and protecting people on the planet, right? And so you work with lots of different stakeholders, lots of different people in the gaming industry. And, who's a gamer in here? They're gamers? Yeah. It's a growing population and it continues to grow. And there's a lot of young people, especially Gen Z, on these platforms. And so I'm just wondering, needless to say, it's growing and it has influence and you can reach a lot of people and make a big impact. But in your own words and in your own work, why is the gaming industry the one to tackle with the climate crisis? And what is Games for Good doing to place the pressure there?
Sure. So I guess one thing is maybe like a little bit of myth busting. I think sometimes people still think of gaming as, the teenager in their mom's basement with the curtains drawn. And that is no longer the case. There are more than 3 billion gamers on the planet. Almost half of our population is gaming. And some of you kind of tentatively raised your hand saying, like, maybe I'm a gamer. No doubt there is an app on your phone that you are checking into every day that you are playing a game on. Most likely, 90% of the people in this room are actually gamers. It's just that we don't consider ourselves gamers because maybe we're not glued to a console. But the idea of gaming has shifted. If you are not gaming, you're niche nowadays. So that's something I think that we need to understand and change the narrative around, because if we don't, we're not going to understand how to unlock that power. Because with those 3 billion people that you can reach, the games industry, it's more than $300 billion a year. It's bigger, actually, than music and movies combined. So these kinds of shifts, I think, need to happen so that we can really, tap into the influence. And, when you're thinking about games and these superpowers, we have agency within gaming. We have imagination. We have empathy, community. And it doesn't mean that music or film or TV don't have these things as well, but maybe not in combination. And so with games, especially when you're thinking of the climate crisis, games are fantastic at trying to get you to understand complex systems, right? And breaking things down and helping you practice something and failing and then learning to do it again and getting better at it and realizing that that's okay. So I think sometimes when it comes to the climate crisis, we think if we don't get it right immediately, then we'll just give up, or there's so much fear out there when it comes to this stuff. And I think games are just an amazing tool at helping us build that resilient mindset that we can actually translate into the real world. So I can go on about this all day, but yeah, I think that's where we need to start, is just a little bit of reframing, shifting the mindset around what gaming actually means, what it can do. And if you have the attention of those 3 billion people in a space, imagine what you can do with that when you're holding their attention captive, right? And you're teaching them things that they can then translate into action. So, yeah.
That's great. And, I think it's all about creating community and getting people really mobilized and excited about something. And similarly, Eric and Maggie, you work in these spaces of music and sports to engage people in unique ways and new ways to engage in climate, whether it be sustainability, food, etc. So I'm wondering, what are ways that you've seen musicians and athletes activate their fans on sustainability in an effective way? And why do you think that type of storytelling is so important right now? And Eric, we can start with you.
You want me to start?
Yeah,
All right. I figured that was set up right for Maggie, but yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I mean, even just to build a little bit on, because what Deborah was saying, we were in a prep conversation. I think the first place we start with is we admit that we don't have it figured out, and I think when that story and that comes across from our athletes and our entertainers, I think it really resonates with people. We talk a bit about storytelling when we were backstage and preparing for this conversation, and the stories that are the best stories that are told are the ones that can touch multiple and diverse individuals and are long lasting. And in those stories, we don't use words like environment or sustainability or green, right? I've spent a lot of time working within sports and within NASCAR in the Deep South on NASCAR lots. And you can imagine the way in talking about the environment to people who are camping at a NASCAR race, which is a fascinating experience. I could talk a lot more about that. And I love that because I could talk to real people about issues, but I did it in a way that met them where they are. So I think sports and music gives us the chance to do that, and our athletes and our entertainers are our best vessels for it. So, I mean, I think you asked, what are some of the ways we have had more artists coming to us increasingly over the last number of years asking whether it's an artist that has a rider where sustainability is built into the way in which they want to perform or the way they want to have an experience at our venues, or that they just won't come play our festival if we don't have certain initiatives in place. So we own and operate a festival called Cali Vibes in Long Beach in February. It's a reggae festival. It's one of my favorites. I'm a huge reggae fan. And we had Jack Johnson come a few years ago. Now, Jack has long been an advocate for the planet, probably no surprise, but that he came with this interest, but he came with his team and said, we're going to come, but we're only going to come if these things are met, and we're going to help you get there, right? And so, as a sustainability department, I was already trying to push these initiatives onto our colleagues at Golden Voice. It was a lot easier, right, when they call you and say, hey, Jack Johnson really needs sustainability to be built across this entire festival. Can you help us? And we're like, yes. And we're like, thank you, Jack. So, we built this incredible program and put this program in place that we're very proud of. So I think, the artists and the entertainers and our athletes, sort of certainly help the sustainability departments, but they do it in a way, and the way we tell the story on site at the festival is in a way where we're engaging that fan who may go home and his or her own lives and influence the way in which their parents want to make decisions. Or, we've seen a lot of work in sports I've done over the years where cities have been trying to increase recycling adoption, and they've used the local sports team and an athlete at a Major League Baseball game and a message during the 7th inning stretch to talk about the importance of recycling, and then the recycling rates in that city increase, right? So our sports fans and our music fans are also our consumers, are also our voters, and are also constituents within cities. So it's a massively important piece to bring that artist voice into the conversation.
Well, I think especially musicians, also athletes, but musicians have a direct line to their fan base, unlike, an actor who plays a character, or, which probably you're going to focus more on the storytelling of the project, but the musician is the mouthpiece, right? And so, there's an organization called Planet Reimagined from Adam Med at HAR, and their research shows that fans respond the most when it is an authentic cause that the artist has embraced. And so some of the things that we have seen and that we have done on Billy's tour, we have, there's an organization called Reverb that we work with all the time. Reverb comes on our tour, not only works on our sustainability of our tour itself, but we have an eco-village at every show. And at that eco-village, fans can come learn about their local climate organizations. They can learn about Reverb. They can take the Support and Feed Pledge, which I encourage you all to do, to eat at least one fully plant-based meal a day for 30 days. At least one. And they can do that at the eco-village, but we also have taken other steps on Billy's tours. We use a screen, so before the show, we have video that played 3 times talking about climate change and the impact of what we eat on climate change, also talking about the local economy and feeding people in the city, but we can use those screens for storytelling. There's even things in arenas. We use the crawls to, somebody said this yesterday, which I saw while watching, unfortunately, when you go to an arena, no matter how careful the artist has been with their branding, you look up and there's, a bank that you are not happy about. And it's really a problem. We would love to get to the place where an artist could challenge the advertising of the arena itself. Just FYI, if you go to an arena and you see that, that's not the artist, that's the arena. So I'd love to get there. But that's the kind of fan interaction. We've done plant-based food drives at concerts with Paramore and Billy and Dave Matthews Band. Bands like Metallica are doing amazing things to connect with fans. Really, it's a rare opportunity with a musician because there's no one between them. And so many musicians care. There's so many people involved in the climate space right now. Music events, concerts. I know Lee is going to talk about this tomorrow. So those are just some of the many ways musicians can move the needle. We powered Billy's set at Lollapalooza last year almost entirely with solar. And it's awesome. I just want you to know, behind the scenes, It was so scary. And if it had failed, I would have, really been eating mud. But, somebody had to take the risk, right? It had never been done on a headlining set before. So that's the kind of innovation, they've powered the Luck Reunion, the entire festival. But, those are the risks you have to take. They're a little bit of risk, but that kind of innovation is really going to pay off very, very soon.
I love that. I'm so inspired. I'm inspired. This is amazing. You know, speaking on this, piece around, how we're reaching people and the scale we're reaching them, I really want to talk about scaling, because that's a big thing that not everyone likes to talk about in the climate space sometimes, because we have these amazing, brilliant, almost what seems like perfect ideas, but then it's like scalability. How do we actually get it to the mainstream? How do we actually, place that pressure in the mainstream? And so, Brad, I want to pass it back to you for a second. I wanted to know, what advice would you give to companies that have done very little public communications about their climate values, who may be scared about putting that forward, but they have the resources to scale, but maybe they're not willing to take the risk yet? What's your advice to them?
That's a great question. Well, as I think about it, someone who cares deeply about climate has for a long number of years. Even I am tired of hearing climate. So I guess I would challenge the company to think about what they have a true connection to. So you're talking about delivering meals, people who in need. That is immediately a more compelling personal thing than saying, let's try to solve climate, because it's so big, right? So what are the actions, what are the people in your community that you can hear from that are doing something that might actually seem a little small scale, and you might be a little underwhelmed at first, but there's a compelling story in that you can elevate and amplify. So you don't go at climate straight ahead. So that's where I'd begin anyway.
I love that so much. And, Daphne, I would say that you're on, the beginning of your journey, right? And I think your story is so inspirational that you quit your job and you're starting on this new path, and you're doing amazing, with how you're trying to explore scaling while supporting your nonprofit. And so I want to know, what is your advice on the other end of things, for people who maybe want to get started with their own initiative, maybe even want to quit their job and get started in climate? What have been the challenges for you for trying to scale while also remaining intentional and rooted in your purpose? And what's your advice to someone who may be going through the same thing?
How long have you got? I think the only thing that gave me the conviction to leave a very steady job was the belief that I could model through some kind of real proactivity the difference that I wanted to see. And the truth is that, I haven't really thought much about it again, because it actually has employed a lot of the skills that I utilized when I was working in the fashion space. But there is something, I think, pretty renegade about creating a company that's sort of constitutionally designed to give back, right? I think that when that's your guiding star, it's actually not hard to be committed to it. And I will say, just in terms of both maybe the challenges and the benefits of scaling, right? In all of the partnerships that we do with the large sort of corporate entities we're in dialogue with, first of all, we try to select aligned companies, right? And by aligned, I mean they're willing to actually commit with their dollars. It's pretty quickly apparent, who's just in it so that they can have a quick sort of marketing hit. And I think the benefit of being small and starting small is that you can try to implement some kind of incremental change, right, with these large companies that I think oftentimes don't feel like they can lift up the hood on what they're doing, because it's not a pretty picture. And so rather than dismantle the system all at once, we basically try to go in, educate leadership, work with their sales associates, talk to them about the issues, and really try to breed this culture of advocacy from the inside out. Allowing them to feel like they can participate in the work too, instead of feeling like they're at odds with it. And I think just the bigger part about scaling and the reason why we lean into these collaborations is that they have very high visibility for us, right? So we can deliver the food sovereignty work that we're doing to the biggest, broadest audience possible. And I think that sort of synergy, right, the sort of 1 and 1 equals 3 is what I'm most interested in, but I'm also very much looking for partners that will commit with their dollars as opposed to just paying it lip service.
It's fantastic.
Something Daphne was saying there just also made me think about the scalability part of what you were asking. And often companies that are excited about offering a more sustainable, responsibly made item will make a few of them so they can offer that. And they can say that we've made a few of these. But they don't make that change in their biggest volume styles. And it's actually way more valuable, even if they don't make the whole style more sustainable, if they even just change some portion of the biggest volume style. So that's when you talk about scale, yeah, even if you change some of the fiber in your most popular form, I would say do that.
Yeah, maybe I could just also tack on. I thought that was great, Brad. It's interesting because, right, the space that we exist in is a space of consumption, right? The industries that we've chosen to penetrate total about $10 trillion in annual spending. So this idea that consumption or capitalism is going to go away is, I don't think that's realistic. But I think what companies can do, right, is trade on sort of desirability, right, and covetability to talk about sustainability. But even better, right, you make the best possible good that's out there, right, that also then delivers on this other thing. And I think that most people in the sustainability space, and oftentimes when I'm speaking to the CSO or someone who's leading the sort of ESG efforts within a company, they're not really speaking with the product folks. There's sort of this lack of communication between them, and I think these two things have to be sort of deeply integrated in order for these things to succeed and be adopted on a much wider scale. It's also funny because at a lot of the summits that you go to, there aren't any finance people in the room. And what that really means is that unless someone there, someone who's there representing the bottom line is not participating in these dialogues, that company hasn't made any real kind of commitment to issuing a change. You need the people who have the dollars to make that commitment.
This has been such an incredible conversation, and it's so unfortunate that it's coming to an end, but I would have dreamed of having a conversation like this when I was finishing college a couple years ago. Things like this just didn't exist. Conversations like this didn't exist. And it's so exciting that there is so much cross-sector collaboration and opportunities to build out the blueprint for the future. And that's exactly why, I created Green Jobs Board, was to start creating those resources and those pathways for people to find their climate space. And so in the spirit of Green Jobs Board and finding your climate space, what is your advice to someone who's at the beginning of their journey, or maybe is in a job where they feel like, okay, I could challenge that sector or try to build my own sustainability group in my company or organization, but I just don't know what to do? What is your one piece of practical advice, if no one else gets anything else out of tonight's conversation, that they should walk away with as, their call to action that they should bring to their office next week?
Start down there.
Start down there.
Oh yeah, start down here. I love this topic. I help co-teach at a university, and I work with a lot of students all the time because I appreciate those that work with me. Honestly, we talked about incrementalism. Make one step, right? And there's this concept of entrepreneurship, right? If you're in an organization and you want to work in sustainability and you see a pathway for you to be able to create that within the organization you're in, there's a lot of power and opportunity within those roles. I know a lot of people who have head of sustainability roles like I do, or in other roles where they've created that within an organization because they were part of another function and they just put their hand up and they worked on something they were passionate towards. They did it with a smile, and then that led to the next thing and to the next thing, and then you can find yourself in those roles. So I'd say focus on entrepreneurship, and certainly it doesn't hurt to build relationships and networking. This is a very small space, right? We're a couple of degrees removed from, I think, everyone probably working within it. So it's good to reach out and build relationships with folks.
This feels pretty fresh to me just because my company's about 24 months old. It's interesting, in the last sort of 8 months, I've hired 2 staff members, one of whom was leading sustainability consultant at one of the big consulting companies. And he had been authoring all of the sustainability reports for the CEO, but was really exhausted because he was not seeing any shift or change. And he wrote to me out of the blue and he said, "Hi, I really think I could help you." And I was thinking, gosh, I don't know if I can afford this consultancy. It's a little bit out of my league at this juncture. And he said, "No, I'd actually would like to work for you." And I realized that what I could offer was agency, right? That's the one thing any of us have in this lifetime, right? Is to convert our skills and our passion into something that matters to us. And I think the next generation really has that. My assistant that just joined the team turned down a job at the World Economic Forum to work for us. I don't know why. It's a question. I'm not sure why, but I think that they see a group of young, committed people who are engaging in an experiment, right? I don't know the outcome of that experiment. All I have is my will, my energy, my proactivity, and my passion. And I think they're interested in coming along for that ride. And I think the best thing that you can do is just sort of lead by example, and others will follow, hopefully. And ultimately, it becomes something that I hope we're able to ultimately do, which is to generate some kind of cultural movement, right? Where you have this sort of groundswell of passion and desire to affect real systemic change.
Boy, I'm a little happier today because Senate Bill 1137 did get, it's not going to be on the ballot. So I'm a little encouraged. It was a big win. But I'm generally pretty pessimistic about where things are going. So I think to these people starting out, I would tell them it's going to be a really hard fight. It's going to get harder. So pick some really great people to do the fighting with. And I think you'll be sort of brought together, brought closer. The people that you do this with are going to be, they're going to be your cohort. They're going to be your people. So it's grim, but the people that you choose to go at this with are going to be your besties.
Actually, to echo that, I think for me as well, it's community. I think it's all about trying to find your people so that you stay motivated, because it can get tiring, even though all the stuff that you're doing can be really exciting and it's good and you're passionate about it and there's purpose, but you can still get tired because sometimes it's hard to say no to the good things, right? When there's so many and you're like, which good thing do I pick? I'm tired. So I think, okay, so that resonates, yeah. So I think, when you have people around you, I can have one phone call with somebody who is in this space, and then I'm energized again. I'm like, okay, let's keep going. So I think that community aspect is so important. And then the other thing I would say is, just start somewhere, especially when it comes to your career. I think I've always created my own job, whether I was working for someone or now working for myself. And wherever you start is not where you're going to end up. So I would say just start somewhere. Yeah.
I love the community and the community of Support and Feed, and all the volunteers has given me the only hope I've really had in this issue, and all the incredible people I've gotten to meet that are so inspiring. Really, keep us all going. I think my tip is to just ask questions, constantly ask questions. You may not be the most powerful person in the room, but you can ask a question. Why this? Why not this? Can't we do this better? Just look around where you are. If you work at Starbucks, if you work at a dentist's office, Start there. I mean, I don't think you do because you're all at the Hollywood Climate Summit. But wherever you are in your life, if you're raising children, ask questions about the world around you and start change in your own world. And you might feel like a lone voice, but gradually it's kind of shocking. People start to follow you. So just start with your own voice wherever you are.
And I'll offer one last piece of advice. I think the biggest thing that has helped me in my journey of a climate career has been seeking out mentorship and also providing mentorship to others. And so one action I'd love each of you to take away today is to think about who are you going to reach out to from this summit who might be a potential mentor to you, and who's someone here who you'd want to mentor. And that doesn't need to be someone who's necessarily younger than you, but maybe someone who's in a similar sector, even a different sector, where you can create a cadence and actually build a relationship over time to have that cross-sector collaboration and build that community. And you never know where that ripple effect will lead you. So thank you all so much for this amazing conversation. Give it up to our panelists.
Thank you.
And have a good rest of your night, everyone. Thank you.
Give it up big for this panel one more time. The final panel of what I'm already hearing is being described as the greatest day of the Hollywood Climate Summit. Thank you so much. It's now officially networking hour, so go ahead and get on up. Make sure you got all your belongings. We got snacks. We got sweet treats, and we got booze. If any of those are appealing, or you have to leave because you've got to go outside, go down to the first floor and let your dreams become reality. I'll see you down there. Thank you so much. I think that's all that I had to say. All right.